Hi everyone. Today I'm here with Floyd Davis, my husband and the owner of Red Basket Farm. Hi.
Hi.
So tell me about you and your business.
Well, basically, like you said, it's Red Basket Farm. What we do there is we basically raise vegetable crops. And we do it a little bit different than a lot of farms that do what we do, in that we do farm essentially 12 months out of the year, even though we are here in Northeast Ohio. And it's part of it is that we have a lot of greenhouse space that we can grow stuff during the winter versus just outdoor production. Obviously, if you could see outside the window today, it's like 12 and snowing and the ground's froze, so we can't do a lot of stuff outside this time of year, but we can do it inside.
So why did you pick produce?
Well, originally when I bought the farm, I had no intent of growing produce. When I bought the farm, I had other ideas of what I wanted to do as far as farming is concerned, because that's what I wanted to get back into. And originally I sold flowers, sold hanging baskets and annuals and vegetable plants and that kind of thing. And at the same time, I also sold a little bit of sweet corn. And I would have people who would stop and buy sweet corn, and after doing that for a year or two, they would start to ask for tomatoes and peppers. So I started growing a little bit of that. And around that time, there was a local farmers market that started up, and didn't know anything about farmers markets, never did that, and looked into it and decided to sign up and participate. And so started selling a little bit of produce there, along with the flowers that we grew too. And it just kind of, pardon the pun, grew from there.
So you've done other things growing up and while you were in college, and kind of how did you get to the point where you're growing produce?
Well, I actually paid my way through college by having a hay business. So I baled and stored hay in practically every barn that I could possibly find. And then during the winter, I would do deliveries. I had a lot of customers that had pleasure horse, they owned pleasure horses. And then I had one customer that was a stable that they housed a lot of horses. And so that allowed me to continue doing some farming and stuff when I was that age and pay for school.
Right.
Plus, I didn't really want to work anywhere else. I kind of wanted to work for myself, so that made things a lot easier. But how I really got into produce, the story really kind of developed when around, I believe it was around 2006, I came across this paper, this report that was written, and it was written by Mary Holmes. She's from Cleveland and taught at Case Western Reserve University. And the report was called Entrepreneurial Farming in Northeast Ohio. And I read that, and what that was about were, it was outlining and really kind of highlighting what small farms in this part of Ohio that were doing that allowed them to make a living at the farm. And it was small acreage, small production, that kind of thing. And really at that time in the Cleveland area, the local food scene was really starting to take off. So a lot of these farms that were highlighted in this report were based kind of in the greater Cleveland area. And when I read that, there was something it clicked. And I'm like, you know what, I can do that. And call it divine inspiration, call it whatever. It just felt right. And I had made a change from the career that I was doing to another job that was actually working with small local growers and who sold produce. And so I got to know that part of the business. I got to know the type and type of businesses and type of people and who the people were that were buying locally grown produce by doing this job. And that allowed me to develop the farm on a nice gradual basis. It allowed me to learn everything as I was going, because I had never grown produce on that type of scale.
Right.
And because I started doing farmers markets, one of the ones I did was actually in the Cleveland area, in the Tremont neighborhood specifically. And because of its location, it allowed me to make contact with some of the chefs that were working in the Cleveland area, and some fairly well-known chefs. And they would, at the end of the market, they would come along and want to buy stuff that I had left over. Well, we did so well that I didn't have stuff left over. So I got to thinking, well, how about I call you before I come to Cleveland, see what you need, and then when I get done with the market, I'll just deliver it to your restaurant. And that's how the whole restaurant delivery started. And it just grew exponentially from there.
So it sounds like common sense, but you really took advantage of an opportunity.
Correct, yeah. And the more I talked to the chefs, the more they said they loved working with local suppliers, but they said there were two issues. One was inconsistency. In other words, they couldn't get product on a very consistent basis. And the other one was that the farmers just never called them back. And so I'm like, okay, here's the perfect business plan.
Right.
Let's be consistent with what we're doing, and let's develop a marketing plan that allows me to work with them on a basis that works for us, but also works for them. So initially, it was an email process where I would email them lists or call them. And the problem with calling is that I don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of time. So fortunately, with the smartphones, it worked out perfectly because we developed a system of ordering for them that involved texting.
Right.
And it was simple, it was easy for us because we could send out a list of what we had available. It was great for the chefs. They could look at their phones real quick and respond back. But then I also had a record of what it was that they wanted. And so it was simple, it was easy, it was quick. It worked well with the chefs, it worked well for us, and the business just basically took off from there.
So why is your produce better?
Well, that's a whole nother subject. I could spend an hour or so kind of talking about it, but I can kind of condense it down into one thing, and that is the soil. And really what that has to do with is the way that we grow the products that we grow. So the way that we look at it is that we're not so much growing plants as we're growing the soil. So the way to kind of explain that is we're growing the bacteria and fungi and beneficial nematodes and those kind of things in the soil. Those, when it comes to how a plant lives and thrives in the soil, those things are essential components because that's how the plants actually derive their nutrients. It's not from the fertilizers that we add and those kind of things. In the natural process of things, plants derive their nutrients from the soil. And they do that by colonizing good bacteria, good fungi, and those kind of things. And modern farming practices actually destroyed that natural environment. So part of what I do is we're building that in our soils, which allows the plants to gain their nutrients from the soils that or the nutrients that are found naturally in the soil, which makes them healthier. And then when we consume it, we're healthier. So it's really nothing new. I mean, this is just the way that farming was done up until the past maybe 80 to 100 years. And that's why small family farms going back early part of the 19th century and the 1800s and stuff, they were very successful because it was very diverse. They grew a lot of variety of crops. They had different types of animals and they applied the manures to the soils and they rotated their crops and they rotated the animals through different pastures and stuff. And it's taking what those natural processes and really kind of applying to what it is that we do today.
And it takes years.
It takes years, yeah. Because the soils were in pretty decent shape when we bought our property, but they weren't great. And because we grow part of our production outside and we also do some inside the greenhouses, it's a controlled environment. So we're able to really experiment with things inside the greenhouses more so than we can outside because we have a longer growing opportunity inside. The weather's a little better because we can control it. And so it's helped us to kind of do some experimenting and really kind of figuring out this process before we really kind of roll it large scale with the production outside. Now, that being said, we are doing a lot of things outside too, using cover crops and reduced tillage. I mean, we very, very minimum tillage now, the least amount that we do. And there's a couple other things that kind of want to incorporate into this next coming year as well. So we're always looking, always experimenting, and always trying to find things or ways to do things better.
And in the middle of all that, trying to do it around our weather.
Yeah, exactly. As we are in Northeast Ohio, and it's cold. And the cold has an effect on the biology in the soil too. It doesn't destroy it, but it slows it way down. And so, we have a fairly short window of opportunity. When the soil temperatures warm up in the spring, the soil activity, the biological activity, starts to pick up, and then obviously it's good through summer and then through fall, and then once it gets cold again, it slows down. So, so it's working with those parameters also.
So going from doing one type of farming, getting into what we call, a regular job, going back into produce farming, why do you, with all these obstacles that you have to, really fight all the time when it comes to things, why do you love farming though?
Because of that. I mean, there's certain challenges and stuff that come with that. And, I worked at a desk and pushed paper around the desk and answered the phone, and there just wasn't any challenge to that, and doing what we do now is completely different. But I guess when people ask me, why do you farm? And the simplest explanation, but one that probably makes the least amount of sense, is I don't have any choice.
What do you mean by that?
You just proved my point.
You're right.
I can't explain it. I don't know. It's just there's something inside of me or in you or whoever, when you're doing what you're supposed to, you know it, and you can't do something else. I've tried. It just doesn't work, and there's just no way around it anymore.
It's who you are.
Yeah.
So what inspires you?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of things. I can't really pin it down to just one thing. I mean, doing what it is that I'm supposed to do. I mean, that's a great inspiration. Being able to share that with other folks, that's another inspiration. And, being able to expand upon that and, learn more and more about what I do, that's a fantastic inspiration. And just being able to share that, whether it's having somebody come to the farm and taking them on a tour and showing what it is that we do, and you see them, they're just like,
it's the look.
Yeah, I don't, quite know how to explain it, but being able to share that aspect of it, but then also being able to take a good, healthy product that somebody is able to take to their home, or we take it to a restaurant, and that chef is able to create these amazing dishes with this stuff, and and they just say how excited they are to get something in that looks good and tastes good and lasts for a long time. I mean, that's a great inspiration.
There's a lot of gratitude from people.
Constantly, and to me, that's an inspiration. So I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just a lot involved in that.
So what's your vision of the future? What do you desire? Where do you see the farm?
I guess one of the things I want to continue to do is really kind of work on developing the biological part of the farm. Really getting to know the soils a little bit better, and how that relates to the varieties that we grow, and those kind of things. The other part of it is really kind of deciding where we want to go with the farm over the next phase, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
Right now we're still supplying restaurants, we're still supplying schools, and supplying our own restaurant, and I want to continue with that, but there's other avenues that we want to look at as well. Partly because our son Nathan is taking more of an active role in the farm, so we need to know what is that going to look like going forward. What does he want to do as well? And I mean, I have like a lot of other things I'd like to kind of do too, but we'll continue with that. And I want to do more with on the greenhouse side of it as well. Whether that's potentially looking at maybe some hydroponic production, or just looking at some different things that we can potentially do with the farm, and specifically with the greenhouse side. Now, we've done everything in the greenhouses we do without heat and without supplemental light. Maybe we need to readdress that. In the past, it's never financially it just wasn't worth it to spend the money that it takes to grow that during the winter. But technology has changed. There's things available now that weren't available 10, 12 years ago when we were first starting to get into this. So I don't know, there's just a lot of things. There's a lot of directions we can go. And, you know, and obviously now because of what has happened over the last 2 years with the pandemic and the way that things have changed. I mean, you know, one of the things that we've talked about this year is that we're really kind of redefining the farm and really kind of looking to, okay, what direction do we need to go into? You know, years ago we used to do a CSA, a community supported agricultural program. And, you know, one of the things that we're looking at doing now is bringing back some version of that. So there's a lot of things that we're juggling right now when it comes to the farm.
And you're just letting it happen.
And just letting it happen, yeah. Letting that which knows more than me.
Let it happen. Well, you're always an inspiration to me, so thank you for sharing.
No problem.